Hey, what's going on, everybody? Logan Arliss here, Illinois Aviation Academy. Thank you for joining us for the first Webinar Wednesday event of the new year. Before we get into it, I'd like to start with some announcements here from the Academy. First up, we've got 6823 Yankee just undergone a engine overhaul, so it needs to get 25 hours for break-in. Your chance to fill some columns in your multi-engine section of your logbook for a special rate, $200 an hour. During this time, the airplane has to be operated at constant power settings, so it'll be limited to time building, cross-country flight training, as well as instrument approaches. Also, we have a CFI Academy that'll be starting on February 22nd. What better way to start the new year than to earn your CFI? This academy is going to be taught by our accomplished former chief pilot, Mr. Scott Malcolm. Now, for tonight's webinar, we'll be learning about what it takes to become a flight attendant. So we'll cover the qualification requirements, job training, job description, as well as the various roles and the different career advancement opportunities for flight attendants. And we'll be speaking with Ms. Chelsea Lopez, which we'll bring on here right now.
Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Chelsea, loud and clear. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. First, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to educate us on the career path of a flight attendant.
Absolutely. My screens are all scrambled. I'm just trying to get you on my screen.
Yep, we can stand by here.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Okay, this will have to do. Okay, I think I'm all set up.
All righty. So before we get into the technical stuff, first off, I just wanted to give props to Christian. So we were able to get Chelsea Lopez on through one of our very own instructors here, Mr. Christian Chawaniak. So when we decided to have a flight attendant on, I reached out to Christian, and through Christian, we're able to get in contact with Chelsea. So thank you, Christian, if you're watching this. So before we get into some of the technical stuff, Chelsea, could you tell us a little bit about your backstory? What made you decide to pursue a career as a flight attendant, and how your career has progressed with United?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys know, my name is Chelsea Lopez. I currently live in Chicago, Illinois. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I got into aviation actually because a family member of mine was a corporate flight attendant, and I saw firsthand the traveling that they were able to do. I liked the schedule. It was all very intriguing to me when I was actually in high school. So I decided early on that I wanted to be a flight attendant, and I ran into the situation of, I'm only 19 years old, and most major airlines don't hire anyone until you're 21 years old because you're serving alcohol. So I actually, through some research and recommendations, found an airline it was at the time called American Eagle Airlines, and they hired me because you didn't have to be 21 years old at that point in time. So I flew for a regional airline, and they have smaller aircraft. I was the only flight attendant most of the time on the plane, and I worked with them for 5 years before wanting to move over to a larger carrier based out of Chicago, which was United Airlines. So I ended up with United, and I've been here with United based out of Chicago for the last 5 years.
Awesome. So you've had 5 years to adapt to the Chicago winters then.
Yes, and I'm still not used to it.
Yeah. Yep. So getting into the technical stuff. So what are some important job skills that are required in order to be a successful flight attendant?
So you definitely have to be a good communicator. You have to be customer service oriented, I would say friendly, especially at United with a slogan like fly the friendly skies. It's important that you are able to be personable with our customers. You definitely need to be able to exercise good judgment in the morning in the moment, because you don't have a direct supervisor. You don't have any management on board the aircraft to help guide you. So you are the crew and you're in charge. You have to be able to make those good judgment calls as situations arrive. And you have to be able to be on time. The airlines run like clockwork. So if you are late, you are affecting the operation, and that's not a good thing. So you have to be able to be on time.
Absolutely. That's definitely an important job skill for the airlines. So what are the general requirements necessary to become a flight attendant or to apply to become a flight attendant? Such as, is a college degree required? Is it recommended? Are there any age requirements? I heard you say, I know you got to be 21 to serve alcohol. So do you have to be 21 to work as a flight attendant as well?
So at United in particular, yes, you do have to be 21 to be hired with us. You have to be able to pass drug tests. You have to be able to pass a background check. You have to have a passport. One thing that's interesting is you can't have a DUI because some countries won't allow you into, they won't grant you entrance into their country if you have a DUI or a record for that matter. So you do have to be able to pass a background check. At United specifically, you do not have to have a college degree. It's not necessarily preferred or suggested. You have to be a high school graduate or have a GED.
Awesome. Now, once in order to work as a flight attendant, are there any certifications or licensure requirements that you have to maintain?
So not prior to being hired. Once you are hired and employed with United as a flight attendant, you do receive an airman's card, which is, I guess, it is a certification, but it's not something that you have to necessarily keep up with. Once you are given it, you have it throughout the duration of your career. One thing to pay attention or to look out for there are scams out there where people will advertise flight attendant schools and they'll say, oh, we'll give you a certification saying that you went through our schools, and they're really expensive and they're not necessary at all. You just apply for the job, go and interview and get the job. You don't need to fall for any of the certification flight attendant school scams.
That's very important information there for someone who is interested in pursuing this career. How about medical conditions? So myself being a pilot, so we have to maintain a medical certificate. Is there something like this for the flight attendants? You have to hold a medical certificate, or is there any medical conditions that would prevent someone from being able to work as a flight attendant?
So I know like with pilots, you go through your yearly medical exams. There are not medical exams for flight attendants yearly. You do have to pass like a light test during the employment, but that's just more of pushing carts, pulling carts, and being able to lift or push up to 55 pounds.
Interesting.
Unless you have like an existing medical condition that would prevent you from flying, or if you're affected by altitude change, then you're fine.
Absolutely. So once hired on, what is that training process, or what does the training footprint look like for a flight attendant, and how often must a flight attendant be retrained?
So once you're hired on, once you're offered the job, they send you to training. With United, our training center is down in Houston, Texas. So you are put up in a hotel in Houston for 6 weeks, and you have a roommate. You don't get to pick your roommate. Everything's at random, and training is long and it's rigorous. The days are, at least 8 hours long, and it's 6 days a week. And the first week of training is really just the first few days is just getting acclimated and getting to know one another, getting all of your devices issued to you. We have at United what's called a link device, and it's an iPhone, but all of our manuals are on it. So before this, we used to have a really big book full of all papers that told us what to do and, how guide us through any situations that we would come across, but now it's just in the form of an iPhone. You get fitted for your uniforms, which is exciting. It gives you something to work towards. But after those first few days, it is training all day long, every hour of every day, going through customer service and safety, everything that's customer service and safety oriented.
Absolutely. So is training specific to aircraft? So if you are trained as a flight attendant, can you fly on, any aircraft in the fleet, or do you have to do specific training for each specific aircraft?
So during your time in training, you are trained on every aircraft type. So we have the Airbus, the 737, the 757, 767, 777, and the 787. So you're trained on every single one of those aircrafts, how to evacuate them, what safety equipment is on board the aircraft, where it's located, and you're tested on all of that before you can graduate from training.
Very interesting. So what are some of the common reasons that someone would not make it through training or certification?
So in training, there are rules. You have a curfew, and there are basic rules while you're there, because United's putting you up and they're paying for your training. So you have to follow those rules. If you don't, typically you're let go. Also, if you fail any of your evacuations, safety is paramount. That's the number one most important thing that you take away from training. So if you cannot evacuate an aircraft, if you cannot pass your CPR test, if you can't pass any of your weekly tests, then unfortunately you're let go from training.
Absolutely. Now, being on a flight, it seems like there could be a handful of flight attendants on the airplane, and they each have their own specific roles. So what are these different roles in which a flight attendant can partake?
So depending on what airplane you're on, the smallest aircraft we have has a minimum of 3 flight attendants. The largest aircraft we have has a minimum of 9. We always have what's called a lead or a purser flight attendant, and they are the flight attendant in charge. If anything goes wrong, then you communicate with that lead flight attendant, who communicates with both of the pilots, so that things don't get convoluted or lost in translation, to keep everything pretty mainstream and keep the communication tight. So you have the purser flight attendant, that's the lead, who makes all the announcements and greets all the customers as they come on board. And then all the other flight attendants are managing the cabin, providing the service, and making sure that they're meeting all of the safety requirements, while customers are boarding, up in the air, and while we're deplaning as well.
So what does a day in the life of a flight attendant look like? So what are a typical working day, typical working month? So how many days on, days off, those type of things?
So I would say it's a funny question, because there is not a typical day. If you are on call, then your schedule could be different every single day. But I would say, for the most part, if you are given a trip, you come to the airport, you go through screening, you go to your wherever your gate is at, wherever your flight's leaving from, you'll check in, you'll show your ID, you'll board the aircraft, you'll do your safety checks. Then you'll have a briefing with the pilots and your lead flight attendant to make sure that everyone's compliant, everyone has everything that they need for that day, for that trip. You'll work your flight and you'll do it all over again. Flight attendants are on call from anywhere from half of the month. If you're an on-call flight attendant, or we call it a reserve, if you're on reserve, you're at the company's mercy. You'll know what your days off are for that month, but you don't know where you're going. So when they call you, that's when you find out. If you're what's called a line holder, you have a set schedule for the month and you get to pick where you go. And the longer you are with the company, the more seniority you have. And that's what allows you to hold a set schedule. So if you have a set schedule, you can kind of plan your life around work. Whereas if you're a reserve flight attendant, your life revolves around the days that you're on call.
Absolutely. How about bases? So is that seniority as well? So do you bid for a specific location?
Yeah, so out of training, depending on the needs of the company and the flying, that's how they decide where to send you. Once you are sent to your base, you are locked in there for a period of time. I believe it's 6 months. And then you can put your transfer in. So we have bases in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Austin, Newark, JFK, Chicago, Denver, and Florida. So you can put your transfer into another location, and if it reaches your seniority, then you are awarded to move to that base.
Very interesting. Now, do you have to live at that base, or can you commute?
No, so part of being a flight attendant, it's one of the most flexible jobs in the entire world. You don't have to live where you work. So for example, if you live in Los Angeles, but you are based out of San Francisco, it's your responsibility to make it to San Francisco in time for your trip. But as long as you make it, you can live anywhere in the world.
Awesome. Now, what are the specific rules or requirements regarding dress code while working as a flight attendant?
So I would say, especially here at United, we have a strict dress code, and you are provided a set of uniforms right out of training. And then you're also given an allotment of points, and you can use those throughout the year to supplement your uniforms that you're given. And there's lots of options for both men and women, but you can only wear the pieces that are issued to you by the company. You can't wear anything that you can't purchase directly from our uniform store. You cannot have any visible tattoos. So if you have a tattoo on your arm, you would have to wear something that covers them at all times. You can only have hair that's natural in color. You can't come to work with, we'll see flight attendants come in with lavender colored hair, and it might be trendy, but it's really important to United that you're projecting a professional and neat and groomed image to our customers. So everything has to be natural. You can only have a certain amount of earrings in your ear. You can't exceed 2. You have to wear a watch. So we are a very neat and tidy looking airline as far as images are concerned.
Absolutely. Now, what would you say are the biggest responsibilities of a flight attendant?
Safety. Safety is the number one priority of the airline, to ensure that our customers are taken care of, and that if there is an emergency, you're entrusted with making sure that everyone is safe. And in training, they run through pretty much every possible scenario, from somebody having a heart attack, you're trained in CPR and using an AED. If somebody breaks their arm, they teach you how to make a tourniquet if needed, or a brace of some sort. We've had you're just trained in pretty much every mechanical or medical situation that's possible.
So what do flight attendants like most about their job?
The free travel for you and your friends and family, of course. That's probably the biggest perk. And I would say getting to, travel the world for a living, and being able to see different places and wake up in a different city every day, and meeting people. And what I see here in my work environment is there are people who met in training 40 years ago, and they're still friends, and they still fly together every week.
That's awesome. What would be the most challenging part of being a flight attendant?
Everyone says that they're flexible, and the airline changes pretty much every day. I mean, right now we're going through obviously a global pandemic. So COVID is in the airline's face every single day. Literally before this call, I'm at work now. I was called upstairs because a flight attendant was on an aircraft and found out she tested positive. So, it's challenging for flight attendants because their customers are not compliant, and they're at risk. They're exposed to potentially contracting COVID, and it's challenging for them to remain flexible with all of the changes. But the company does the best that they can to provide the playbook and how to handle the challenges as they come.
Absolutely. So what does the future look like for flight attendants? So I know like Boeing posts the future outlook for pilots and aircraft technicians. Is there a demand for flight attendants moving forward?
I would say right now, there's only a demand for flight attendants if we have flying. So unfortunately, with COVID, we lost half of our workforce here in Chicago. Because there was just no demand for the flight attendants. And in order for the company to survive financially, that meant, taking cuts elsewhere. But we are seeing a slight spike in travel, which is nice. And, with the government assistance, we're able to recall flight attendants back for a period of time. But there is certainly only a demand for flight attendant if there's a demand for travel.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll be seeing that pick back up here shortly.
Yeah.
And we'll see some more hiring going on for both pilots as well as flight attendants. So I know pilots are required to retire at age 65. Is there a requirement for retirement age for flight attendants?
There is not. As long as so flight attendants go to training once a year, and you're opening and closing every door on the aircraft, and you're evacuating each type of aircraft. You're showing that you can do CPR. You're going through the customer service training. As long as you can complete your yearly training successfully, then there's no age, there's no set age that you must retire at.
That's awesome. So you are a perfect example of career advancement within the airline. So you started as a flight attendant, now you're an in-flight supervisor. So what does the progression of a flight attendant career look like for someone who's looking to make a career with a specific airline for a long period of time?
Yeah, so there's so much opportunity within. One advantage with United is it's a huge corporation. It's a huge airline. So if you want to be a flight attendant, that's an excellent starting point. There's a lot of opportunity as far as if you want to stay in the in-flight world, the flight attendant world. For me specifically, they have what's called special assignment. So I was a flight attendant and I was interested in working down in the office. So I applied for what was called special assignment. You go through the interview process, and instead of flying for that month, you're working down in the office, building relationships with supervisors and managers, helping your flight attendants, with check-in process or with questions with their electronic devices. You're upstairs planeside supporting them with whatever they need, and that kind of, you get to see everything that takes place before the plane leaves the airport. So you're introduced to different departments, and you're introduced to different people down here in the office, and you see everything that's behind the scenes. From special assignment, you see opportunities for a supervisor posting, and you can apply for them. But I mean, the flight attendant position as a starting point is one of the best positions because you touch customer service. You're working with them, you're working with ramp, you're working with our ground crews, you're working with the pilots. So you really get a good understanding of what each department does, and that can help guide you if being a flight attendant isn't your end goal.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, the impact of COVID. As we all know, it's impacted every industry, not just the aviation industry, but it's hit the aviation industry pretty hard. How has the flight attendant job specifically been impacted by COVID-19, and what were the biggest changes to the role of a flight attendant?
I would say we've been impacted because we've lost so many flight attendants, but flight attendants are working for up to 16 hours a day and having to wear a mask the entire time to keep themselves and the customers safe. I think that the customers that are flying, they obviously want to fly, but they need that reassurance from the flight attendants that it is safe to fly. And that's a really difficult position for the flight attendants to be in, because on top of all of their safety duties, they're even more engaged, but somewhat from a distance with the customers. We've also seen a huge increase in customers not complying with our policies. The customers don't want to wear the masks on board, and it's created a huge problem. We've had thousands of customers banned from flying United because they won't comply with the flight attendants' directions on board. So I think it's really been a challenge, and it's more exhausting now than ever. Flight attendants are working longer hours because there's less of them. They're having to wear a mask all day to keep themselves safe, and they're facing challenges that they really haven't seen before.
Absolutely, yeah, it's got to be tough. Now, you have been with United for quite some time now. What makes United Airlines such a great company to work for?
United has a huge hand in community service. We have every year what's called the fantasy flight, for example. We turn the airport into the North Pole, and this is all sponsored by United, and we work with organizations here in Chicago as well, and system-wide, but specifically in Chicago. We work with children, young children who are terminally ill and their families, and we turn the airport into the North Pole. We have and this is all put on by employees. So we have flight attendants specifically who dress up in characters like Elsa and Spider-Man and Wonder Woman. And we just make Christmas come to life for these kids, and we give them the gifts on their Christmas list. We take them on an aircraft that's decked out with every Christmas decoration and Christmas music and hats. I am actually on the board of directors for United We Care, which is a nonprofit organization that is for employees, but it's actually funded by employees of United. So if you are experiencing a hard time and you need financial assistance, or if you're hurt on the job and you're out for a long period of time, or we've had employees whose houses have burned down and they've lost everything and they're not financially stable. This is a independent nonprofit that is funded solely by United employees, and that financial assistance is there to help them. We go to hospitals every year and we deliver little teddy bears to kids that are, again, very gravely sick. And all of this is United sponsoring it, but all of this is employee driven.
That's amazing.
And yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity to give back, which is huge.
Yeah, very cool. Amazing. So what advice can you give to an individual who wants to have a successful career as a flight attendant?
So what I would say is do your research. Like I said before, keep an eye out for those scams. You don't need to go to flight attendant school. Just do your research on the culture of every airline, because there's a lot of major airlines in the US. They're all vastly different. So do your research on the company culture and see which one's a good fit for you. You are never tied to one location. You can at any point be told, we need you to relocate. So that has to be something that you're constantly thinking about. I never in my life dreamed that I would be living in the Midwest, but I've been here for almost 10 years. In February, it'll be 10 years. So, you have to have those conversations with your loved ones, your friends, your family, and don't let anyone hold you back. If you love traveling, if you love people, if you love variety, and you feel like this is the job for you, then absolutely chase that dream. Don't let anyone hold you back, but be prepared, because I tell people, being a flight attendant is certainly a career, but more than anything, it's a lifestyle, because you are all over the place. For at least your first few years of flying, you're not going to be home with your friends and family for holidays. You're going to miss milestones. You're going to miss birthdays. The more time you put in, the more benefits you'll reap. But the first few years, you're definitely at the beck and call of the airline. So I would just say keep those things in the back of your mind, but go for it. I mean, it's the best job in the world. And if I had to look back over my 10-year career in aviation, I wouldn't change anything. It's truly the most flexible and the best job in the world.
Awesome. Great advice there. Now, where could someone who is interested go to learn more about pursuing a career as a flight attendant?
I would just go to the airlines websites. I wouldn't, I know there is one reputable website. I think it's called flightattendantcareers.com. Other than that, I would stick to the airlines websites directly. Mm-hmm. It's the safest bet, and they have the requirements, and they post when they're hiring for flight attendants and what location. So I would stick to just their own websites.
Perfect. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Chelsea, for coming on. You were great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wealth of information, and we enjoyed learning from you tonight.
Thank you.
Yep. And for the rest of you guys, stay tuned. We'll be back on the 27th. We'll be speaking about aircraft insurance with none other than Mr. Chris Fostiak. So thanks for joining us tonight, guys. Hope you learned something, and we will see you next time.